The Biden administration has increased tariffs on electric car imports by an astounding amount. Chinese imports will now be charged a 100% tariff, effectively doubling the price of any electric car coming into the United States from China. This move could have major implications for Tesla, which has its largest and most productive factory in China, even if it doesn't affect them directly right now, but perhaps later down the road, as the trade war between Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi begins to heat up. The latest regulations impact roughly $18 billion worth of goods imported from China, spanning steel, aluminum, critical minerals, solar cells, cranes, semiconductors, and electric vehicles. While this is just a small fraction of the $427 billion in goods that was imported from China to the US in 2023, it appears to be more in preparation for what's coming. Metals like steel and aluminum have been a problem for many years for US industries, where overcapacities in China can cause excess supply and therefore much lower prices for these materials spilling into the United States and harming industries that rely on stable pricing for these goods primarily used in manufacturing. But now with the rise of electric vehicles, China is preparing to export their EVs all over the world, especially given that the largest EV market is currently that of China's, and they have hundreds of car companies building electric vehicles, with a handful leading the way. For instance, in the fourth quarter of 2023, Chinese firm BYD surpassed Tesla globally in terms of producing more electric vehicles. While Tesla was still ahead for the full year and remains ahead for the time being in the first quarter of 2024, BYD produces low-cost vehicles in China and has already moved into Europe in 2021, planning to grow rapidly and triple its market share to dominate the industry. And again, it's not just BYD, as there are many top players in China, including SAIC, Geely, Huawei, and many more. To be fair, or rather unfair, the Chinese government under President Xi hasn't been playing by the same rules as the United States. The country requires auto manufacturers to partner with domestic Chinese players in order to operate in China, which isn't the case for a Chinese firm in the US. General Motors, for example, as well as Volkswagen, have partnerships with SAIC, who has to own a majority stake. Chinese players have also made inroads over the years by acquiring foreign auto companies, learning from them, and expanding through other brands as well. Geely, for instance, is the parent company of Volvo and Polestar, which are or were Swedish brands, as well as Smart or Smart Car, which was under Daimler, a German company. It took many years for Tesla to enter China as a wholly owned company, as they made an exception for electric vehicle makers. This has benefited Tesla greatly. By building a local factory and supply chain, they're also able to avoid the tariffs that China imposes on the US for imports. It's also helped China by sourcing local materials, hiring locally, and bringing new products and knowledge into China. But really, the United States has fallen behind in manufacturing, especially in EVs. If it weren't for Tesla, the United States auto industry would be in major trouble, as the legacy Big Three OEMs, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, now part of Stellantis, are in big trouble today, making uncompetitive electric vehicles and moving extremely slowly relative to other players in the world of manufacturing. Elon Musk has stated in the past that Tesla's number one competitors in the world are none of the legacy OEMs, but instead it's the Chinese automakers. In his own words, they don't burn the midnight oil, they're burning the 3 a.m. oil. They're working harder and faster than anyone else in the world, which is making it extremely difficult to compete with the Chinese manufacturers. Tesla's Giga Shanghai factory in China was built in just 10 months and produces roughly double the number of vehicles of its next highest productivity factory in the United States, which took much longer to build. Of course, this is partly due to the work ethic and labor laws in the country, but in the grand scheme of things, China may not be playing fair, but they're winning and the United States is terrified. And before we continue, stop using Yahoo Finance, stop using Google Finance, and have a look at our website, themarketisopen.com, where we have instant stock quotes and quarterly financial data going back up to 15 years, and it's all freely available. So these new measures brought on by Biden are meant to protect American workers and union workers, especially since the White House is predicting an overcapacity of EVs coming out of China, which could seriously harm the US auto industry. Under the Trump administration, tariffs on EVs imported from China to the US went from just 2.5%, which is where they stood for many years, while the US was paying 15% or more to China, and Trump increased the tariffs tenfold to 25% duty. Biden is further quadrupling this to 100%. This comes as China has now become the top exporter of electric vehicles worldwide, and they're also number one for many of the key components that go into automobiles, such as batteries and battery materials. This is why there are many limitations on the $7,500 EV tax credit in the US that are related to where materials are sourced, and if they come from China, the tax credit is reduced or disappears for auto OEMs in the US outsourcing their components. The problem is that it will still take years to build new manufacturing and supply chains in order to replace this heavy reliance on China, who are capable of building virtually every part of the vehicle. There's a long-standing belief that Chinese vehicles won't succeed in North America as they won't pass safety tests, etc. But all of the safety components, all of the components in US-made cars are also made in China, or capable of being made there and for much cheaper. Now this move by Joe Biden to sharply hike the tariffs is technically very good for US auto manufacturing, at least in the short term. China is ready to effectively dump cheap EVs into the United States, and this new measure makes it a bit more difficult to do this. It also buys the US OEMs some time to build out their own manufacturing for EVs and supply chains, although the traditional OEMs seem to have pulled back into hybrids and gas cars, which is a very dangerous move. It's only a matter of when, not if, that the Chinese EV makers will move into their home turf, and they likely won't be ready for the impact at this current rate. For the time being, however, especially with these new rules, the Chinese automakers could flood their own market with supply, especially if the US is sort of off limits, which would hurt themselves, in the same way that they overbuilt houses, for example, and the market crashed. Although they could adjust and dominate other countries in the world, which would not be good for US OEMs in the long run. That said, even Tesla's price cuts in China, despite selling a higher priced vehicle, does impact the Chinese EV manufacturers, and at the same time it crushes the US manufacturers. The interesting thing about Tesla is that they take their knowledge and production know-how from each of their factories and bring the best ideas back into their other factories. While lessons learned from Fremont helped build a more efficient Giga Shanghai in China, in turn, learnings from Shanghai were put back into the newer factories in Texas and Berlin, and even upgrades at Fremont. Legacy US automakers don't have electric vehicle gigafactories, let alone one on almost every continent, knowledge sharing amongst themselves. And so there's a big advantage for both the US and for China to have Tesla operate their factory out of China. Now the hope is that Tesla's factory doesn't get used as a bargaining chip when China plans to retaliate in terms of their own set of tariffs on US goods or some other method they use to fight off the US. To be fair, the Biden administration has snubbed Tesla and Elon Musk every chance they get, and almost makes it seem like they don't care about Tesla at all. Maybe it was all for this, to prevent Tesla from being in the middle of it all. Only time will tell. Now, Elon Musk has praised China many times in the past, and appears to have great relations with leaders there. For example, bringing FSD software to China was recently approved by the Chinese government. Elon Musk also genuinely respects and admires the work ethic in China, which is very much aligned with the rate of progress that he expects, especially from his employees. There's simply no way that union workers in the US can compete with Tesla's workers in the US, let alone Tesla workers in China, simply due to the incentive structure. It looks like the best way for the United States to stand up to China in the long term is to once again insource manufacturing capabilities and knowledge and automate this manufacturing like crazy. By automating, the cost of domestically produced goods in the US can come down as it levels the playing field in terms of reducing the influence of lower wages in countries not just China. Biden's increase of tariffs can also help or hurt Tesla in various departments. For instance, Tesla produces their own solar panels in the United States, and now with less competition coming from China's solar due to tariffs rising from 25% to 50%, it makes Tesla's products more competitive, and solar hasn't been doing that well for many years at Tesla. The same is true that for EVs that Tesla sells in the US, they will have an easier time facing off against Chinese firms that now have to pay massive duty fees. However, any inputs that go into Tesla's products that come from China, including semiconductors, batteries, aluminum, steel, etc., could be a negative. Even if Tesla was using US-made steel, now that there's less competition here, prices could go up. Now, Tesla's US EVs are the most American vehicles in the world, so really it's other automakers that have bigger problems. Tesla tries to create domestic supply chains for each of its factories, which is favorable for the countries that they operate within, but also should be technically cheaper to source things locally rather than having them imported regardless of tariffs. This isn't true for all items, but it has allowed Tesla to position itself well, especially in the US, in terms of building their cars with US-made parts. Furthermore, the US EV credits have been foreshadowing for some time that the US wants to reduce reliance on China. There's a glut in batteries right now, as Elon Musk mentioned on the most recent conference call, although he didn't exactly say where. Many of Tesla's batteries, especially LFP batteries in their lower-end vehicles, come from China, although Tesla does build its own 4680 battery cells in the US for Cybertruck and technically also the Model Y if needed. They also have battery partners such as Panasonic and suppliers such as LG. And so Tesla is able to shift their supply chain around. For instance, they could put the Chinese-made batteries from CATL in vehicles that they export to other countries and use more locally sourced batteries for their domestic sales in the US, as they've been doing to take more advantage of the tax credits. But really, because the United States as a whole has fallen behind in manufacturing and is lagging in EVs, it ends up being the consumer who would need to pay more for domestically made goods that they would otherwise get cheaper from China. If the United States was just as competitive in terms of manufacturing, this wouldn't be the case. It should be cheaper to purchase an item produced domestically simply because there's a much lower cost of transportation. That said, it could take years to bring back manufacturing capabilities to the US, which could give China the upper hand and perhaps even prevent manufacturing from returning to the US simply because it's just still cheaper to buy from China. Tesla has done an incredible job reinvigorating US ingenuity and manufacturing for building EVs, and there's a lot of work yet to be done. Interestingly, in the long term, Tesla's Optimus humanoid robot will be targeted at increasing productivity, which could theoretically once again level the playing field. But for now, Biden's move to increase tariffs should be a wake-up call for US companies to bring highly automated manufacturing in-house and reduce their reliance on China while they still can. So do you think that China will push back against these increased tariffs from Biden? And will these new measures be good or bad for Tesla in the short and long term? Don't forget to watch my last video on Tesla's unique new Cybertruck motors. Please hit the like button and subscribe, we would really appreciate that. And a huge shout out to all of our patrons that help to support our channel. Your support helps us to continue to make great content. Thank you guys so much for watching.